Oh boy, some leftists online are accusing Sydney Sweeney, an American Eagle, of fascist propaganda. You won't believe this.
Okay, so here's what happened. The actress, known for her roles in Euphoria and The White Lotus, launched an ad campaign with clothing brand American Eagle to promote a new line of their jeans. The tagline, Sydney Sweeney has great genes, and several of the ads directly address the genetic homophone. The ads were slammed for, at the very least, being in poor taste. At the most, they were saying they're fascist propaganda with racial undertones.
Meanwhile, the ads were praised on the right for marking the end of woke advertising, with Glenn Beck slamming a 2019 ad that featured a plus-size black woman and saying that Sweeney's ad campaign is, quote, directly aimed at American men, the kind of men that everyone has said for the last 10 years should be ashamed of themselves.
The actress also promised 100% of the money raised from the Sydney Sweeney gene, a product on the new line that features an embroidered butterfly, will be donated to the crisis text line in honor of domestic violence awareness. That move has also received criticism for the playful and sexual tone of the ad campaign, overshadowing the seriousness of domestic violence.
Have you seen this ad?
I did, and I really hope that everybody that is so offended has donated to domestic violence or any charity of their liking, let's say even in the last decade, because usually it's like all these critics that really do nothing for any cause but have a criticism for anybody trying to do something. There is a number that pops up specifically to donate to crisis hotlines, and so you're criticizing people for over-sexualizing. Maybe I wouldn't have put that ad together, but I also think it's noble of a company to donate any of its proceeds in this capitalistic America to a charity. And so...
Yeah, I don't know who's upset about that. So let's be very clear about what the controversy is, which I think is totally absurd and stupid.
Okay,
and
let's talk about it.
Dumbest things I've ever encountered in my life. She said it's voiceover, it's, camera shot of her beautiful body and her jeans, saying something about how she has good genes, and she's a very attractive, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman.
And it's spelled like jeans, G-E-N-E, crossed out, and then they write, oh, it meant jeans.
And they're saying this is they, being some left people online, are saying this is playing into, like, I guess the Aryan race or some Nazi kind of ideal beauty standards in terms of the genetics. This is so stupid. Sydney Sweeney is incredibly attractive. She is well known right now for being she's like the
it girl,
hot sex symbol person. And it's good advertising, and there's nothing wrong with it. And if you're reading more into this, not only are you wrong and bad, imagine trying to argue that if you like this ad, you're trying to convince young men that if they're into this ad, that's because it's a secret Nazi message and they're probably fascists. Why would you want to convince people that liking Sydney Sweeney, one of the most admired women from the male perspective there is on Earth right now, that liking her in that way, or liking this ad, makes you a Nazi? A lot of men are going to say, well, I guess I'm a Nazi then. If that is your line on this.
Listen, am not
really stupid.
I'm not that riled up about that. I'm not going to lie. It doesn't personally deeply offend me so much that I'm doing a thesis.
I'm riled up that people
I'm saying
pretending they're offended.
I'm not riled up against your thoughts. Yeah. So I mostly don't think it's that this is overblown. However, I do understand and listen to the perspective of people saying, for years, and this is in the beauty industry and everything, we've had these standards that emphasize and almost overemphasize, considering we're in America. No, a certain kind of beauty. So a white woman, blue beauty. Eyes.
Well,
This is overly emphasized, and so that's why we had campaigns where we include women of Indian descent, of American descent, that all live in America, that are Americans, and we show them more in ads like Maybelline and L'Oreal. They didn't used to be very wide-ranging, and beauty is not this objective thing; it's subjective, right? And so everyone has a different person who's the most gorgeous woman, like to them. You know what I mean? Joe Jonas has a different standard of beauty than Justin Bieber. Like, everyone has these different wives and beauty that they love. And so we need to show a variety of women in some of these campaigns. And when you say good genes, it makes it seem like somebody is ultimately superior just because of the race they were born into. And so if we dive into it that way, then people are like, okay, so what's bad genes then? You know, it's just like when we say, oh, she has good hair. It's like, so what's bad hair, right? So then you have to consider who's on the other end of that. And so you want to be in some thesis paper about this, then yeah, we can dive into the racial implications of ad standards and beauty standards in America. Sure, that's there if you really go looking for it. But I wasn't deeply offended by this ad, but I will tell you why people who have seen a history of this in advertising, like there was a Dove commercial where they were like, cleaning your body. Dove is about cleaning your body. And the woman had on a brown t-shirt, a brown woman, a black woman, took it off and turned into the white lady with the white t-shirt. And that was wildly offensive because it's like, oh, I'm getting clean. Like, it's crazy.
Okay,
so
that sounds offensive, but
it was. And that's what I mean. Well, that's what I'm saying to you is that there's been historical errors of people saying that one race is better than the other. And so critics are like, don't do this again. Don't do this again.
I don't think it's saying that. I don't think when we complain about, so conservatives for the last couple of years have complained about wokeness in advertising.
Right.
We're not complaining about there being racial diversity. Obviously, there are beautiful men and women of models of every different racial makeup. There was a effort to depict how real people look in terms of weight that I think was a little bit less well received because we're talking about beauty. And yes, there's a subjective quality to beauty, but there's also, and it changes over time what is subjectively valued in the culture, but there's a little bit of objectivity to it.
No, it's not, Rocky. That's what. No.
In advertising?
No, it cannot. That's not how it goes. Some people like a heavier woman. Some people like a super slim woman. It's not objective in any way. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I poll 1,000 men about if they're heterosexual men and about women, I'm sure I'll get 1,000 different answers. Who's your favorite ever? Now, Sydney Sweeney might pop up a couple times.
Sydney Sweeney
She'll
is
pop
going
up
to
a
get
couple
more
times in that conversation, but
a plurality are going to say Sydney Sweeney. So the idea, so it's somewhat objective with also a range of different tastes and opinions. Yes, but to be using in advertising someone who is objectively beautiful is fine.
And it was also, it wouldn't be
fact.
woke for them to have someone else of extreme popularity of a different race and say, oh, so-and-so has good genes.
If they're attractive, yes.
Yeah.
If they're not attractive,
fine.
then no.
The alternative to Sydney Sweeney in a different race doesn't have to be unattractive. If this ad campaign keeps going throughout the year and we see other models, Priyanka Chopra, like, you know, there's like so many beautiful women. It's like, okay.
She's gorgeous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She has good genes too.
Not a race thing at all.
That's what I'm saying. I'd love to see that.
People of all kinds of races.
So American Eagle
but it's
should
a beauty
try to
thing.
enhance this ad. And who's the next one coming? It shouldn't just be, again, the same exact looking woman.
Priyanka Chopra has good
awesome.
genes too.
Exactly.
Lots of good genes to be had.
Beyonce has good genes. We could just go down the list.
And if you have good genes, you can be proud of your genetics if you are a good-looking person without having any kind of racial context to it, right?
Yeah, some people are a little sensitive, and rightfully so, right? We have a history of not doing the right thing. And then, you know, some people think we overcorrected. I don't know.
Were you ever a shopper at American Eagle?
You know what? Amanda, who does our makeup, tells me that they have some really good things in there, so I need to go revisit. I shopped there when I was a little bit younger, but I think I need to go revisit and check it out.
Weren't they known for having, like, basically, like, pseudo, like, pornographic advertisement? Or was that, maybe I'm defaming
You saying that on the back of me? Saying that I'm about to go shop there. I don't like.
Is that Aeropostale or Hollister?
I don't remember. I'm not gonna.
Aeropostale, Hollister. I can't keep any of these stores.
Yeah, it was not American Eagle. American
Eagle is wholesome. Abercrombie. That's what I'm looking for. They all have A names.
I never shopped there.
Abercrombie is the one.
But yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember shopping in the mall?
Recently, actually.
Do you go to the mall to shop?
Yeah, actually, I must try something on. I'm a grandma in that way.
You want to try something? Yeah.
Yeah, I must try it on. Even if I get it in the mail, I'm trying it on, and then I'll send it back if it doesn't work out. I'm not going to just go with it. I'm
actually going to the mall today.
Really?
To purchase a Nintendo Switch 2, which I will be giving my review
But not to shop. Like
I'm going specifically to Best Buy to get a Nintendo Switch 2.
Oh, boo. I was about to say I'll come with you and I'll go clothes shopping. We can
Oh yeah, we can do a
meet you back at the food court.
Meet at the food court.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll post the review online of our shopping trip.
All right, we've got a lot more to come on Rising. Stay with us. FDA's top vaccine and gene therapy regulator left his position this week after just over 2 months.
Vinay Prasad, a longtime critic of the COVID-19 pandemic response and vaccine, was appointed to lead the agency's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research by Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. back in May. But since then, he's received criticism from some on the right over his approach to drug approvals and his past support for Democratic politicians.
Right-wing influencer Laura Loomer took to X last week and slammed Prasad in a lengthy post for being a, quote, leftist saboteur and undermining Trump and RFK's Make America Healthy Again agenda.
But it appears to be his handling of a new therapeutic for a rare genetic disease that led to Prasad resigning in the end. The FDA, under his leadership, asked pharmaceutical company Sarepta to pause distribution of its gene therapy called Elevidys, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, after 3 patients who were taking the new drug died, according to Reuters.
Now, the company refused to do so, and then the criticism began pouring in. Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum wrote on X, more on the man destroying the president's legacy for helping patients. The FDA's Vinay Prasad is standing with progressive health policies. And then in an op-ed in Real Clear Health, describes Prasad as a, quote, one-man death panel, accusing him of having contempt for Sarepta.
On Monday, the FDA lifted the hold on the drug for patients who could still walk, but the damage seemed to be done. By Wednesday morning, Sarepta's shares were up more than 10% in pre-market trading. A Health and Human Services spokesperson confirmed Prasad's departure in a statement, saying, quote, Dr. Prasad did not want to be a distraction to the great work of the FDA in the Trump administration and has decided to return to California and spend more time with his family. We thank him for his service and the many important reforms he was able to achieve in his time at FDA.
Reporter for Heatmap News, Matthew Zaitlin, said this of Prasad's ouster on X. Amazing story about how Washington works. A COVID contrarian doctor gets a big FDA role, is skeptical of a drug for a rare disease, and then Rick Santorum and Laura Loomer pop up to call him a lib, and poof, he's gone. And that is basically a summation of what happened here. Vinay Prasad is someone, I think, known to a lot of our viewers. We cited him quite frequently during COVID. I believe we interviewed him on the show. You know, I said vaccine skeptical, but he is not skeptical that vaccines work in a great number of cases and should be a good choice for people. He was pushing back on some of the vaccine requirements or recommendations for young people or otherwise healthy people. I found him an interesting commentator on health-related issues. I don't always totally agree with him, but it's well-informed. It's not crank, crazy stuff like that. It's good, interesting stuff. I thought he was a great addition to the FDA. And he is in the past been otherwise a progressive Democrat, like RFK Jr. himself, who was a Democrat, who ran as a Democrat and supported Democratic policies. So for Laura Loomer to come in here and say, wow, it's amazing that he supported Bernie Sanders years ago, he's undermining somehow RFK's agenda. RFK was a supporter of Democratic policies until he joined the coalition. So that's insanity and nonsense. What I suspect is really going on here, Niall, is that a drug company was mad that Vinay Prasad was standing in the way of his of their profits, and I don't know. I don't have any information, so I can't. I'm just speculating, but I wonder if someone at this company or a PR firm hired by this company said, "Oh, let's dig up some old tweets of his and see if we can get right-wing people to be mad at him and manufacture some outrage that leads to his ouster." Would not surprise me if that's what happened here, and I think that's very bad.
As a general matter, I'm not slow to take the worst possible interpretation of drug company motives or of the pharmaceutical industry generally. I think I'm skeptical of them. I am also skeptical of Laura Loomer. Now, this guy got loomered by all accounts, got painted as a left-wing Democrat. He had endorsed, as you say, or been supportive of Sanders in the past. But, like, does that matter to what he's actually doing? There's not only the fact that RFK Jr. is presumably a supporter of his, somebody who backs him and has the history that he has, but also, like, he's in a health role. What radical left Democratic policies is he purportedly implementing in that role, right, other than policies that Kennedy and, by extension, the Trump administration would presumably be supportive of?
The radical left policy that this drug, again, I don't know about the actual situation, but he is an expert, and he's saying this drug he has questions about. There are people who died taking it, and the drug company, of course, wants it, you know,
on the market,
released and recommended to as many people as possible because that's how they make profits. I'm not against the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not against them making profits from selling drugs. I am also more in the right to try kind of mode where I would rather we allow too much than prohibit too much. It gets complicated because the thing with drugs, and actually Vinay Prasad had a great topic on this, why drugs are different than health, or than food, the food category. The food category should be less regulated than the health category because the FDA for a food product is just saying, we're not recommending this to you. We're just saying it's not dangerous enough that we're stopping you from taking it. We're not recommending it to you. We're not subsidizing and paying for it. We're just saying it's safe enough that you can take it. With a drug, it's different. When they approve a drug, they're saying this is going to be recommended to you. This is going to be paid for by a government-derived health thing. So the drug products have to meet a higher level of safety because they're also going to be subsidized and recommended, whereas food products don't.
Right.
And that was an interesting analysis. I hadn't quite considered that before.
Right.
So I really liked him in this role, and I think this is the same. The Laura Loomer kind of outrage over, oh my God, you used to be a lib, is so, I'm not supposed to swear on this show anymore, so something selective that it makes me furious. Like, again, RFK was a former Dem. Donald Trump's former Dem. We had, like, Tulsi Gabbard, who I don't know if she likes or dislikes. I think she's more hawkish, so she probably doesn't like Tulsi Gabbard. She's probably like, Tulsi Gabbard is still a socialist or something. It's just so selective. It's stupid, and we gotta be past that. It's very unhealthy. The level of influence and control she has for some reason is insane to me. This is a woman who once chained herself to, I think, Facebook headquarters.
Facebook or Google, I can't remember, to protest her own barring from one of those platforms. Yeah, I mean, she has driven several people out of the administration now and has taken credit for doing so. And I find someone like her having that level of influence pretty disturbing, among many other disturbing things of the Trump administration.
Yeah. I want smart, sound, health FDA decisions made by open-minded people who are not beholden to the industry, who are not hostile to the industry either, who are just trying to make good decisions on which drugs we have enough information about that they should be available to people. I default toward making them more available, which is actually a concern I had about RFK, because for a while he was, has led crusades against the pharmaceutical industry and their profits. So I don't want to be overly restrictive, but I also don't want, them paying for, again, I have no actual knowledge that they did this, but arranging hit campaigns, orchestrated, cancellation, Twitter mob type stuff based on past support for Democrats. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's very dangerous, if that is happening.
If that's what's going on. Maybe of her own volition, she started to search for his old tweets and old things he said about.
Just because she wanted to.
Again, the criticism of Trump from long ago, J.D. Vance called Trump
America's Hitler, or at one stage.
Right. Is she going to do a tweet thread about how he should be thrown out of the administration for that?
Right.
I don't think so.
Presumably not.
Very stupid, very silly, very selective.
I would have thought, and I got to own it, that these tariffs were going to sink this economy by this time, and they didn't.
That is, of course, comedian and host of the Club Random podcast, Bill Maher, who appears to be backtracking on his early criticisms of President Trump's tariff policy.
In the past, Maher had called Trump's tariff-led approach to relations with China, quote, backwards, and even went so far as to suggest he was rooting for a recession just so Trump would realize this was not good and reverse course. But in a recent conversation with left-leaning commentator Brian Tyler Cohen, Maher admitted the disastrous effects he predicted would come from the tariffs just haven't come to pass. Take a listen to a little more of their conversation.
I remember along with probably most people, was saying at the beginning, by the 4th of July, the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty.
Meanwhile, President Trump is back in Washington after a trip to Scotland, where he signed his latest trade deal following the implementation of his so-called Liberation Day tariffs. The deal with the European Union sets tariffs on goods from Europe at 15%, just half the rate that Trump had previously threatened. and includes a pledge from Europe to buy more than $750 billion in American energy over the next 3 years.
But some Democrats in Congress are not so impressed. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer slamming the deal as, quote, fake. He points out that European leaders have admitted that the deal is not legally binding and that they have no control over whether or not the investments actually happen. I suspect this is going to be one of these ones where we have mixed feelings, maybe on each side. I mean, I do think off the top it is fair for people on my side of the small desk to say that some of the predictions of absolute sort of apocalyptic collapse in relation to these tariffs have not happened. I also think that the counterbalance to that is the Liberation Day tariffs were threatened for about a week, during which the
economy did dive.
The economy did dive. The stock market lost about an eighth of its value, and there was a real crisis, at which point Trump backtracked. So was the prediction wrong, or did Trump not actually follow through at the scale he had threatened? He certainly didn't follow through at the scale he threatened,
Right.
So there we are.
Right. Yeah, I saw, my dear friend Batya was also tweeting about, doesn't this prove that the supporters of tariffs were right? I saw Orrin Cass saying that with Michael Schellenberger. Does it? We don't have the massive tariffs in place. Trump is out there negotiating trade deals with everyone, trying to bring the trade down. Maybe the market is seeing what Trump is doing, looking at the long-term picture and saying, okay, Trump's goal is to have trade deals, allowing for more trade and fewer tariffs with nations all over the world, and we're reacting positively to that.
Right.
At the moment in which it seemed most likely that we were going to have crippling tariffs, the economy was doing worse.
Right.
So I think it's almost, I like Bill Maher, I generally agree with him. I think it's almost the opposite of what he's saying. It's doing well because there was a reversal of course, and the long-term plan, the idea that we're going to have permanent tariffs in order to cripple bringing foreign goods in and do everything here at home, that wing of the Trump thought lost. And tariffs are a negotiating tool to have better trade relations with everyone. That view won. And so the point of that is eventually to get to free trade. So the market's reacting favorably to that. Also, you can never say that, if the market's going like this with what the policy was, well, maybe if there was no tariffs at all, it would have been going like this. Just because it's doing well because the American economy is resilient, maybe it could have been doing even better if we'd never threatened tariffs in the first place. Or maybe not because they were just part of getting a favorable trade negotiations. But that's how I would address his comments there.
Yeah, and the other point is that we're just getting toward the end of a period of massive uncertainty about all of this, because there was that initial week of the Liberation Day tariffs when everything was pretty catastrophic, and then Trump backed off and there were supposed to be 90 trade deals in 90 days, which didn't happen. Now with the August 1st deadline looming on Friday, there's this rush to get agreements in place. They've got the EU one. Britain agreed a kind of framework a while back, and some other nations have done likewise. But to me, it seems at least as likely that companies or nations that have a net importing balance into the United States have thought over the past couple of months, well, let's just see where this settles first and then see, are we going to eat a slightly increased tariffs? Are we going to pass those on or not? The rate of inflation certainly has not risen to the level that some people thought, but it has in fact ticked up. It's ticked up by a few tenths of a percentage point over a couple of months. Does that continue? Does that accelerate now? That seems to me what the danger is. I just don't think the fundamental question of has Trump's approach to tariffs worked? I just don't think we have a definitive answer to that yet.
And then nothing makes me more insane. I want to pull my hair. Sorry, I didn't.
At least you have the option of doing that.
Is when the White House or some Trump administration affiliated account was celebrating how much revenue the tariffs have brought into the government. People, that's taxes. That the revenue that's it does generate revenue for the government in terms of higher costs being passed on to us, the people buying the stuff. It's the exact equivalent of the U.S. government imposing a sales tax of something on goods and raising a bunch of money on that and saying, look at how much money we raised, yay! You are paying for it. I am paying for it. You are paying for it. Anyone buying things here is paying for it. if you want to make an argument that this is a better way to generate revenue for the federal government than taxes or property taxes or income tax, okay, whatever, we can have a discussion about what is the ideal way to raise money for legitimate government functions. That you think there's a lot of legitimate functions. I think there's just some government functions, but fine. The government has to raise some amount of money. We can have a conversation about what's the best way to do that.
Tax the rich, Robbie, is the best way to do that.
That's what you think the best way is? But this is just a form of that. They're not raising money out of thin air. They're making it sound like this is all coming from foreign people.
Yeah.
We're raising money off of foreign people. No, the cost of the good, it's passed on to the American consumers, and so they're raising it from us. And that is a loathsome thing to be celebrating for those of us who think we're taxed enough already.
Yeah, well, it's also just the way it is spoken about suggests often that it is the foreign government who's sort of handing over money to the American government, or it's the president of the European Commission saying, here you go, have a few billion or $trillion. Like, that's not what's happening. It's a tax on trade, effectively. And that's where the
they rate, it's a tax saying, well, now this good costs this much, or they have to pay this thing, so then the seller raises the price of it by exactly that much to cover the difference, and then you pay more for it. So it's revenue generated indirectly by you, and that should really be kept in mind here.
I can't believe I'm going to be obtuse enough as to make a slightly Trump-friendly argument here, but to that point about the seller raises the exact value of it, don't you think there's an argument to be made that given the importance of the US market to a lot of importers into the US, they would eat some level of tariff without passing every cent of that tariff on to American consumers?
Maybe. I don't know. I think the evidence is, we'd have to refer to some trade economist on that, but I think what I've read about the analysis is they pretty much pass on the full cost exactly to the dollar amount. That markets are relatively efficient. I know some people on the left think it's just massive. If you look at the profit margins in many sectors of the economy, while a lot of people on the left like to imagine fat cats just making a hand over fist in all these different industries, the profit margins on food, on clothing, on a lot of things are very slim. They just don't have the room to eat some massive cost increase. So no, they pass that on. It's slim. They make a lot of profits because they sell a lot of things, but the profit on each individual item is very slight.
Yeah, I just think it is going to be interesting to see how inflation develops, particularly over the next, say, 3 to 6 months, and whether we will see that happening to an extent that I think could be pretty politically ruinous for Trump, because his approval ratings on inflation in particular are actually really quite bad.
He's going to insult Jerome Powell to his face until Jerome Powell deals with this.
Drops interest rates. We shall see.
President, Prime Minister Netanyahu said there's no starvation in Gaza. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry. But we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food, and other nations are now stepping up.
That was President Trump breaking with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's assessment that there's, quote, no starvation in Gaza. Trump did acknowledge he'd seen pictures on television of children in Gaza, and they, quote, looked very hungry.
Speaking to the reporters during a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland, Trump vowed to set, quote, food centers up in Gaza. Let's take a listen.
We're going to continue onward. We do have to take care of the humanitarian needs on what they used to call the Gaza Strip. You don't hear that line too much anymore. You don't hear the Gaza Strip, but it is the Gaza Strip, and it's amazing that it's not being handled a little bit differently. We're going to set up food centers, and we're going to do it in conjunction with some very good people, and we're going to supply funds. And we just took in trillions of dollars. We got a lot of money, and we're going to spend a little money on some food, and other nations are joining us. I know your nation's joining us, and we have all of the European nations joining us, and others also have called, and they want to be helpful. So we're going to set up food centers and where the people can walk in.
Meanwhile, former President Obama wrote in a post on X, quote, while a lasting resolution to the crisis in Gaza must involve a return of all hostages and a cessation of Israel's military operations, these articles underscore the immediate need for action to be taken to prevent the travesty of innocent people dying of preventable starvation. I think that you have to be clear. Like, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's not a legitimate government. There's weapons and civilians in the areas of those weapons and issues happening. But at the same time, 2.3 million people cannot be starved in this way. This is not moral. Starving people is not part of any act of war. It is a war crime. And so I think that the condemnation of what's happening is important, and it needs to be as loud as it is. And I'm glad that President Trump is seeing, like, you have to sometimes sidestep Netanyahu, because he is not, like you said, of any leader, end all be all, always correct. And even though Israel does have a right to defend itself from the attack that happened a few years ago in October, it's still time to figure out how these innocent people can stop being so deeply affected in ways that are easily preventable by just allowing the UN and other people to come in.
Yeah, and they have reacted. Israel killed tons of Hamas militants in Gaza, as was their right. But I am seeing these images. I'm reading and following the reporting on what's going on in Gaza, and it is really shocking to the conscience, the level of suffering of children, women, innocent people who, we can say, well, it's Hamas's fault and it's, this and that, but it's what can these people do? They are caught in this awful situation, and they have Israel trying to root out Hamas and killing people, and they're starving, and thousands have died, and thousands more could die imminently because they've just run out of food. It's so hard to even contemplate, and I don't know how anyone can say we can just let this happen, especially because Israel has laid siege to it, controls the whole area around it, and is in the position to dictate what food can get in. On some level, then you broke it, you bought it. Like you own the suffering of you have some obligation now to take care of these people that live in such a broken part of land. So I'm glad for what Trump said, and certainly we need to allow for humanitarian efforts to intervene.
And several
people who want to help should be allowed to help.
Have reported that people are going to seek those food areas have been killed, I think more than 1,100 at this point. And I think, the biggest thing is that history is watching. Everyone is going to be judged for how they reacted in this moment, whether they chose courage or whether they chose conformity. Yeah. And I think that's a big deal, and that everyone should be involved in
resolving the political, diplomatic, security issues there is very complicated, but I don't think it's complicated that we can't let thousands of people starve before our very eyes. New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani is catching some flack on social media amid the latest shooting in New York City.
So on Monday night, police say that an armed gunman walked into an office skyscraper and shot 3 civilians and a police officer dead. Mamdani wrote on X, quote, "I'm heartbroken to learn of this horrific shooting in Midtown, and I'm holding the victims and their families and the NYPD officer in critical condition in my thoughts. Grateful for all of our first responders on the ground."
X users, however, were quick to highlight Mamdani's old tweets about his desire to defund the police. Now, one of these tweets from June 28th, 2020 reads, "We don't need an investigation to know that the NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. What we need is to defund the NYPD, but your deal with New York City Mayor uses budget tricks to keep as many cops as possible on the beat." Another one of these tweets from November 5th, 2020 reads, "Queer liberation means defund the police." In December of 2020, Mamdani even went so far as to call for the NYPD's dismantling.
Mamdani, however, has shifted his stance and has said that he would not defund the police and will work with them. His campaign website reads in part, quote, "Police have a critical role to play, but right now we're relying on them to deal with the failures of our social safety net, which prevents them from doing their actual jobs. Through this new city agency and a whole of government approach, community safety will be prioritized like never before in NYC."
Investigators are identifying the alleged shooter as 27-year-old Shane Tamura. Tamura allegedly stormed into the skyscraper, which houses the Blackstone and also the NFL headquarters, armed with a rifle, and opened fire in the lobby. Eventually, police say he took the elevator to the 33rd floor and then allegedly shot and killed one more person and then turned the gun on himself.
Now, the New York Post is reporting that Tamura carried a note that cited the NFL and claimed he had CTE, which is a brain injury tied to head trauma. Classmates say that Tamura, who worked as a security guard, was a standout high school football player but never played professionally. Here's New York City Mayor Eric Adams addressing the situation.
No words can describe this act of evil, a man who takes the life of others who are innocent. And no words can fill the void that has been left by this tragedy.
So awful thing to happen. Our hearts go out to everyone affected by it. We should continue to investigate and bring updates on the possible motivations. It's being theorized now. We have no idea if this will hold up or end up being the thing, that it was some kind of anti-NFL thing and that he had some concussion-related problem. Don't know. We will obviously continue to look into that. What is, I think, notable, and of course I agree and applaud Mamdani's statement here about the tragedy, but I can't help but bring up, and many conservatives have, or just many people, many New Yorkers, if you read the replies on that statement that Mamdani made, saying, well, just a few years ago, it's not a million years ago, it's not when you were 12, but 5 years ago, I was hosting Rising at the time, it was not that long ago, you said, in no uncertain terms, defund the police, dismantle the NYPD. You want fewer cops. You think cops are the real threat to public safety. You think they're anti-black and anti-queer. I don't even know what that means. That's not his policy now, but it seems a little, I think it's obvious that it's only not his policy because he realizes how unpopular it is. In his heart of hearts, does he actually still want to dismantle the NYPD because he's a leftist? I would guess probably, and yet he's going to be in very likely New York's next mayor.
I think that the slogan was terrible. Defund the police wasn't a good and effective slogan, but I think the messaging of what it was actually calling for, like the leaders who were pushing for legislation were asking for more resources to be allocated to people that actually can deal with mental health crises and things like that, as opposed to police who are responding mostly to, in higher numbers, people of color in the wrong ways because they're not understanding what may or may not have been happening, and especially on the heels of George Floyd, that didn't need to end in death as we saw. And so I think like safety and accountability are not mutually exclusive, right? You can call for both, and that terminology probably needed to change, but the overall messaging that we can still simultaneously bring in people who deal better with communication, intense issues, and work alongside police so they're not also trying to be mental health experts would be a great start for police departments, so they're not handling situations that are out of their training realm because they're trained to shoot in danger. But why does the situation lead to danger? Why does somebody who is stealing a cigarette lead to danger for you? Why does somebody who's reaching for a pot in their house that has water in it make you think that you're going to die, right? Is it because the person of color by default is more dangerous to you societally because you don't understand that community, because you don't connect with it? And so these are real questions that need to be answered, and there actually are psychological things that make us differ in other people because we don't experience them on a day-to-day basis. We see it every day with people who, that's not my community, I can't relate to it. It could be a long line of things. Oh, they're homeless, I have a house. Okay, they're black, I'm white, right? So these are real conversations that I think need to be had, and that's what defunding the police actually was meant to mean. It means a reallocation of police funding to some other things that will help us stop being in a situation where people disproportionately of color or in marginalized groups are affected in a negative way with their experiences with police.
I think that's the Lindsey Granger version of what that slogan means, which is inoffensive and yes, give mental health professionals more resources. Sure, I'm all for that. That's not controversial at all. No, I think the leftist activists for whom this was an important slogan meant it in exactly what it means on its face, is that they did not want policing. They think it would be better to have no policing than to have the occasional incidents of police misconduct.
You think they literally didn't want police around them? That doesn't make sense. Like, no one wants no police in their neighborhood.
They
There's
have
not
this
one person
naive.
that would want to go to bed.
No, you're right.
There's no police.
You're right. No real person wants no police. You're absolutely right. If you talk to
and none of the politicians with their children want no police in their neighborhood.
Well, they want police for them because they're rich and they hire private security guards. But they're naive and they think that they don't have encounters in the real world. They don't live in poor areas where there is a lot of crime and where if you talk to the people there, they don't say they want no police. They say they want more effective policing. Now, they feel underserved by the police. They feel like they don't get quality policing. And so they're in a situation where they don't like the quality of police services they get. But it's not that they don't want any policing. They want better police services. Rich, wealthy, champagne socialist type people like Zohran Mamdani, who just had a super expensive wedding, 3-part wedding in Uganda and wherever else, thinks that doesn't have any exposure to how real poor people live, and so thinks that naively that all that crime is just mentally ill people who, if you sent a healthcare provider to go have a nice, friendly conversation with them, then they would stop acting out in some violent way. And that is nonsense.
But that's one
it's
way,
just
but there's
wrong
also
and diluted.
no. The overall conversation is community policing, so that means being involved and connected to the community that you're policing, which a lot of times is not the case. So, like for example, in Camden, New Jersey, which is a really rough area of New Jersey, I went to school in Temple, which is not too far from there. They saw a 42% drop in violent crime after restructuring, which is what that was asking for, the police department to focus on community policing. That means putting in reforms for chokehold bans. That can't happen, right? There's no reason to have that happen. Body cameras being instituted fully throughout the police department. That's important, and not being cut off sometimes.
Body cameras.
Independent investigations. It doesn't require, we know the police officers, even when they're not in a good space, it's the good old boys club. That's like an unspoken word. So sometimes your fellow officer can be wrong. We have to be okay saying that, right? And I know in cancel culture, we might have went too far, and every police officer, I have an uncle that was a police officer. I don't think that their police officers are bad wholly, right? That doesn't, I
don't think they're wholly good. They're government employees, and some of them don't do their job well.
So I think that you need to have that training so that you have a connection, or at least spend time in the community, so that you're not just retaliating against everything that's perceived as bad. You're in an area and you're like, oh, that's such a bad community. Maybe start understanding why these children are running outside at 10 o'clock at night. Maybe there's a way to better find opportunities for things for them to do and collaborate with community leaders as opposed to just arresting them all, right? They're still children. Like, I think there's a lot of different things that can be done to try to protect the community before
outside,
it gets to...
Yeah, there's no arrest needed. But if they're looting CVS, or they're smashing cars, or hijacking cars, or attacking people, then yeah, I would like to see some arrests,
but
and
like
then
even
you won't have as much of that.
So if a kid's out too late and gets arrested, that's like, okay, maybe there could be more community involvement to make sure that a kid that's outside is not being arrested.
The curfew
right?
has been imposed because there had been waves. I can see it. It happens in my neighborhood.
But
there
every one of those young people are not
number.
robbing people or doing. Every one of those young people. Some people are just outside because they don't have the right guidance, parenthood, and guidance in their life to stop them from doing that. So if there was more community initiatives, then they would understand, and the police officers would have that connection and be like, okay, let's take your behind home, right?
Yeah, I'm in favor of all those things. In fact, when a lot of those things were shut down during COVID, I predicted that this was going to create great social unrest and crime, because you're right that young people between the ages of like 14 and 20 who live in not perfectly stable social home environments need something to do other than loitering outside 7-Eleven at night. That's where you get crime. You keep those people occupied with after-school programs or sports, school stuff. Jobs are fine. Whatever it is, something that they're just not congregating outside in the summer in the heat, which is how you get bad social adjustment behavior. That's the root of crime in our cities, at least. That's where it comes from. And shutting all that stuff down was just a catastrophic idea that we've only partly recovered from.
So you think we're still feeling the remnants of COVID right now?
For sure. It's impacted our society in ways 100 years from now we'll still be studying the harm we did to young people. But that's a side conversation.
We just spend billions on police and hiring and recruiting new police every year without properly giving them the training, or also thinking about how we could spend money on solving issues with housing and other.
The city has a police shortage. Again, this brings me no joy to say this. I do not want to spend more money on anything, as you know. I don't want the government to need more money for anything, whether it's roads or police or emergency services. I don't want to pay more in taxes. I'm like, they get so much money, can't they just make it work? But I have been forced to deal with the reality, which is that there was a massive spike in violent crime in DC and murders a few years ago. It's come down, thank goodness. And I asked people, what are the causes of it, who know more than I did? And there's a bunch of causes. It has a lot to do with how people who have illegal firearms cannot be prosecuted in DC because of the judges have been very bad on this. But also there are not enough, given the size of our city and the number of crime problems, we have fewer police than we used to have, and that's probably a problem. They can't hire them. And that seems like it's a problem. Even though I certainly don't want to live in a police state. I don't want to be surveilled. I wouldn't want me or anyone else to be victims of stop and frisk where they just routinely harass people. No one wants to be hassled or harassed by the police, but but something's got to be done. And a whole that we can do it without any policing is just makes no sense. And then a lot of these, then the left will talk about more mental health resources, and I'm for that, but that has to have a policing component too. I mean, people like the guy that Daniel Penny killed on the subway, who I forget the name of. He was subjected. Do you know how much money from the city's perspective, from the city's mental health professional services, was spent on him and helping him, and it still didn't work? So mental health is not some end-all, be-all in all cases.
For sure.
Because people who are suffering from mental health problems and drug problems are unreliable. They stop showing up. They stop taking their antipsychotic medicine. They will not be confined to the housing you give them. It's really a mess trying to deal with these people.
I think to pull up Mandani's tweets from 2020, it makes no sense in this moment, because this is a nuanced conversations where tensions from all over the globe were high because of what police repeatedly were doing. When you had Sandra Bland, when you had, George Floyd, like we've seen these instances. And when you think about the ratio of people of color in the country, then you're like, why is this happening more often and why is the incarceration rate with people of color so high, given how many people are here? It's not that black people are inherently more bad, right? That's not literally the case. And so that's the kind of society that we create when we police them in a more aggressive way. And that's what we've done. And, if you go to the history of why police officers even exist, right, they were kind of an extension of slave catchers, right? So if we go back to the beginning of time.
Isn't that a myth?
No, it's not a myth. No, it's not a myth. And so I think if you look up why police came about in the beginning, you'll understand that we need to reform the system. And just like I said about Democrats earlier, because I'm equal opportunity when it comes to saying you need to look at what's old that didn't work, there are places you can fix the police system. There are broken parts of our current police system, and there are ways to enhance it. And both parties would benefit greatly from embracing that and figuring out how to work together to better solve this problem, which might include a lot more mental health, which might include officers that actually have a connection to the community, and also might include actually funding police departments in a way that, like DC, needs more officers actually on the ground.
Yeah, I think Mandani can be held accountable for things he tweeted. It is not like his high school opinion or something, which then we would totally disregard it. It was just a couple years ago. He's an adult. I think he's our age or a little bit older. Or
yeah,
about
and the
our
whole
age.
world was upset about how police were handling people of color in this country.
Okay,
there was a wave.
I do not trust that this is not how he truly feels, and he thinks that, yeah, that'll be better if it was all like a kumbaya liberal socialist thing. And policing for me, a wealthy elite person who can live in a gated community with private security, no policing for you, the underclass.
But the same man who wants to give free access for parents in New York to resources where they have children is the same man who literally wants all those parents to be unsafe in their children. It doesn't make sense. So I think if you sit down and have a conversation with Mandani, I'm not him, so I can't tell you exactly what the tweet meant. It was like 140 characters. But I do think that there has to be some nuance there, that the same person can't be arguing for these things that sound really good to some of the most vulnerable people who are mothers and women, children that we like to protect in the society, but he also doesn't want them to be safe in their streets.
I think he was either lying then or he was lying now, and I think it's more likely he's lying now. And that what he really believes is his 2020 self. But I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Next up, Democrats are underwater heading into the midterm election season. After the break, the dismal polling numbers and how President Trump measures up. We'll be right back.